Video games are much more gay than they used to be. Like, have you seen this? And this one?
Slay!
But that was not the case before, and LGBTQ plus characters in video games were, if not absent, mostly really closeted. So how did we get here, and why did this shift happen? But most of all, is it just queer baiting? Well, like many great love stories, it all started with a kiss. But first, what was it like before this kiss? LGBTQ plus characters have always been a part of media, but they haven't always been easy to spot. From 1934 to 1968, movies had to follow a strict set of guidelines called the Hays Code. Those regulations meant that characters couldn't openly admit to being gay. Instead, audiences had to read between the lines. Alfred Hitchcock's 1948 film Rope is packed with innuendo, but no one actually uses words like gay or homosexual on screen.
Part of your charm, I suppose.
In the original script for 1963 movie The Haunting, the character of Theodora is clearly a lesbian, but those scenes were cut during filming. However, censors left in a scene where Theodora is referred to as unnatural. Something similar happened with video games. While games never had to abide by strict rules like the Hays Code, for the longest time, they avoided saying explicitly when a character was queer, and the only way to find out was reading the user's manual. Other characters vaguely reference their identity in dialogue. Sometimes, even that was too much. Streets of Rage 3 originally featured a flamboyant character named Ash, but he was removed from the North American version of the game. There were some games that put queer characters front and center, but you weren't going to find them at your local game store. I spent a lot of time browsing through PC games at Circuit City in the 90s, and there wasn't a queer game in sight. That's why some LGBTQ creators used unconventional methods to get games in front of audiences. In 1989, transgender artist C.M. Ralph created a game called Caper in the Castro. It revolved around a world-famous lesbian detective searching for a missing drag queen. Ralph advertised the game in LGBTQ newspapers like the Washington Blade. They marketed the title as charityware. Anyone interested in the game could download it for free, but Ralph asked players to donate funds to an AIDS-related charity. Word of the game spread quickly, and it wound up being downloaded by players all over the world. In an interview, Ralph estimated that the game had been downloaded over 250,000 times in the first 5 years. Other queer games, like Gay Blade, followed a similar strategy and wound up selling thousands of copies. There was clearly a demand for non-conforming games, and if publishers were expecting a cultural blowback, there wasn't any. And yet, major publishers were still reluctant to get on board. In the 1990s, gay marriage was illegal in most parts of the world, and LGBTQ acceptance was a far cry from where it is today. There was no market for this type of content like pink economy and gay baiting back then.
They go to boyfriend. Right, okay.
Afraid of potential backlash, most studios opted to play it safe. But then a fateful E3 presentation turned the gaming world on its head. In the late 90s, Maxis, an independent game development studio, was acquired by Electronic Arts. And one of the first titles they began developing under the EA umbrella was a social simulation game called The Sims. EA wasn't impressed by the life sim, and the development team was fearful that the project would be cancelled. Same-sex relationships were programmed into the game, but devs assumed that EA would kill the feature once they caught wind of it. But EA never got the chance to shut down same-sex romance. During a live demonstration, two female Sims decided to take things into their own hands. They fell in love during the presentation, and they decided to express that in the best way possible, with a kiss. That unplanned kiss got the Sims a ton of attention. And now that gamers knew that same-sex relationships were in the game, EA couldn't take it back. When The Sims shipped in February of 2000, Same-sex relationships were intact, and the game wound up being an earth-shattering success. Not only was The Sims the biggest PC game of 2000, but it wound up becoming the best-selling PC game of all time. It was also a huge hit with critics, earning rave reviews and picking up Game of the Year awards. The Sims proved that LGBTQ+ inclusion wouldn't keep games from being successful. Queer gamers had waited a long time to see themselves in games, and that meant that thoughtful presentation had the potential to make a game a bigger hit. After The Sims opened the doors, more and more games started to include queer characters. And this time around, characters didn't have to stay in the closet. Star Wars: Knights of the Old Republic introduced Juhani, the first openly gay character in the Star Wars universe. Fable allowed players to romance and marry characters of any gender. Rockstar made headlines when they released The Ballad of Gay Tony, a GTA side story about an openly gay nightclub owner. League of Legends has introduced several gay characters, including Cassante, who appeared in trailers alongside Lil Nas X. Cassante is even part of a boy band called Heartsteel. Movies and TVs have also made major strides in LGBTQ representation. When Netflix adapted The Haunting of Hill House, the character of Theodora was openly, undeniably queer. Audiences are swooning over gay rom-coms like Red, White, and Royal Blue. While The Sims definitely broke down barriers, this shift also has a lot to do with the dramatic increase in LGBTQ+ acceptance. In 1999, just 35% of Americans supported same-sex marriage. Now it's supported by 71%, and support within younger demographics is even stronger. In 2004, President Bush called for a constitutional amendment banning gay marriage. But by 2015, same-sex marriage was legalized across the United States. And these changes didn't just happen in the US. Countries all over the world have passed laws legalizing same-sex marriage. As culture and society shifted towards a more accepting mentality, queerness entered the mainstream, and this content was much more profitable to make as well. And games have changed to reflect that. That's why in recent years, games have gone beyond simply including queer characters. Games are representing a wider range of identities. Characters can be asexual, non-binary, or still figuring out who they are. Many games are also telling uniquely queer stories. In A Normal Lost Phone, a young transgender woman gets support from an online community. A Summer's End is a period romance story about two women in 1980s Hong Kong. There are fluffy gay dating sims, queer coming-of-age tales, and games about overcoming trauma. Games are a powerful tool for storytelling, and that's why LGBTQ+ representation is so important. Games can be a way for people to explore their sexuality, or can help struggling people feel a little less alone. Queer characters have always been a part of gaming, but now they're not regulated to the background. LGBTQ+ characters are front and center, and that means that more people can see themselves reflected in the games they play. From The Sims to Cyberpunk to Assassin's Creed, video games are more gay than ever, and we wouldn't want it any other way.